Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And today is a recovery and addiction video, and I'm actually going to address and talk about two comments that I got in my video that I did about sponsorship. But before I do, I want to say what I typically say in any video that I do talking about recovery, and that is that I am just sharing my experience, strength, and hope when I talk about these things as they happen to me or my experience in, living a life of recovery. I am not representative of any 12-step program. This is just one person's telling, and so I want to make that very, very clear. And there are a lot of people out there that are sober, that do it different ways, that don't work 12-step programs, that and I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong and any of that. I'm just telling you what my experience is, and take it or leave it and ask questions. And it's the thing that I love about all of this is that we can have an open conversation about it, And if you don't agree with me, you can say in the comment section, Peter, I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree with you, or whatever. And then we can have a further conversation about that, and I think we can all learn from each other. So I wanted to share the first comment that I got. I was going to actually do two separate videos about this, but I'm just going to put them together, and then we can go from there. And I want to say this before I get into this. Any questions that you would like me to address, or any topics that you would like me to address about recovery, I don't care what they are, they can be anything out there. Anything that you've been thinking about, anything that, and I've gotten several comments. I mean, I have several comments saved to continue to address in further videos. But if you have topics that you haven't heard me address yet, or haven't heard me talk about, or just questions that you have, or, you can say, I'm not in a 12-step program, but I'm confused about this, and you talk about this a lot. I'm more than willing to address anything, Part of my goal is to normalize people being in recovery, and you guys seeing that out there, seeing that there are people out there that are living lives of, recovery, and that we're, not a glum lot, as we say, and that, you can see oh, Peter, he has a great life, and he has an amazing life, and, he's grateful, and, and he's surrounded by support and things like that, and, and see that side of it. I think in the world that we live in today, especially, I think we see a lot of sadness that's associated with addiction, and I don't think that we see a lot of the joy that comes along with recovery. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we talk about the sadness and the tragedy, and as you know, I talk a lot about that on all of my channels. But I also want to be a gleam of hope for people out there, that you can see that there are actually people out there that are living and having lives that are sober. So, all right. So the first comment that I got said, could this be the part 2 to this topic? And I was talking in my video the other day about sponsorship and how you get a sponsor, and I kind of went through my whole history of all of my sponsors and all of that. So anyway, all right. And this person said, how do you end the relationship when you want a new sponsor? What's that like? Who typically initiates terminating the relationship, the sponsor or the sponsee? And it's interesting. I think this is a great topic, first of all. It's an absolutely fantastic topic, because I think, for the person that's being sponsored, I think when you want to find somebody else, or you feel like, okay, maybe it's not working anymore, or I'm not hearing what I need to hear, or I'm just not getting what I need. The fear is, I don't want to hurt this other person, or I don't want to let that other person down, right? From the sponsor's point of view, sponsors kind of always say, you go find somebody else if you want to. It will never hurt my feelings, right? Well, I don't know how true that is. I don't know how true that is, that it doesn't hurt somebody's feelings. I think you're always kind of left with, well, did I do something wrong? Or, what was going on or whatever. And I've heard that from many, many people, that will say I don't really know what happened. I think it's different. Maybe if you have sponsored somebody for a long time, 5 or 10 years, and then there's a divide in that relationship, versus if you've sponsored somebody for 3 to 6 months, and maybe, I don't know, that person was a newcomer and they weren't really, I don't know, going to the same meetings as you. Because I do think that there are things that are important with sponsorship, as far as I have had with my sponsors, and that I've had with people that I've worked with, is that it's important for me to see that person eye to eye once a week, and so they can see me, and also to continue to have conversations with them on the phone, not just text messaging, but like on the phone where we're having conversations. And I think it's also important that you're willing to take that person's suggestions. And that doesn't mean that if your sponsor says you will do A, B, and C, and I've never had a sponsor that has said to me, you need to do this. I'm talking about when a sponsor will say, well, I don't know, but for me, what's worked for me, and you go against everything that they tell you to do. Like at that point, it's kind of like, well, what is the role of the sponsor, I've always been taught that the role of a sponsor is to work a 12-step program with you and guide you through the steps, Over time, as I've gotten, older in recovery, I have become closer with my sponsors and things like that, and we've developed stronger relationships. I have found, when I look back and I look at the 5 sponsors or the 6 sponsors that I had, over time, like the reason why I got sponsor 1 to sponsor 2 was because sponsor 1 didn't really have what I wanted. Sponsor 2, like I said in my video, he had this like brutal honesty that I wanted, right? Well, then he passed away. My sponsor 3 was somebody that I looked up to a lot. He ended up moving, well, he didn't move, but he started going to meetings on another side of town, and I didn't see him on a regular basis. That was why I got sponsor 4. The reason I got sponsor 5, I guess I had 6 sponsors. The reason why I have had 6 sponsors. The reason why I got sponsor number 5 was because I started going to different meetings. I started going to like all these candlelight meetings that I was talking about. And the reason why I started going, or I got sponsor number 6, was like I shared in my meeting the other day, like I shared in the video the other day, was because I never felt like I had really connected with a sponsor. And so I was talking to my therapist at the time about getting a female sponsor, and he was like, well, why don't you try it and see what happens? So that's kind of what has happened. I've never, it has been so hard for me, each and every sponsor, to say, like, I think it's time for me to find a new sponsor. Like, that has been really, really hard for me. My sponsor that I had for the longest period of time, who has since passed, it kind of hurt. I wanted to keep him as my like spiritual director, and which is like a word that we sometimes use. And he kind of was like, I don't think that that's necessary and whatever. And then the sponsor that I had from 5 to 6, like I could tell that he was kind of hurt by it too. Luckily, we were able to talk it out, and we, ended up having a great relationship after that. So I think it's difficult. I really do, I think it can be initiated either way. I think, sometimes I think, I've seen people that aren't really utilizing their sponsor, and the sponsor will come to them and say, like, if you're not going to use me as a sponsor, then what are we really doing? Like, maybe you need to go find somebody else. There's this whole conversation about firing sponsees in recovery. I'm not a big believer in that. And that means you call somebody up, and if that person's not calling you every day, or if that person's not doing this, or if that person's not doing that you call them up and you go, okay, you need to go find another sponsor because I'm not it, right? Like, I'm not really willing to let somebody hang out there. Like, if they want to call me up and say, like, I'm going to go find somebody else, or if I don't hear from them in a month, I usually check in or whatever, to see what's going on. But, usually, often in those kind of situations, the sponsor-sponsee relationship just kind of dissolves on its own. It's not something that, like, you have to have a lot of conversation about. It just kind of, like, it just happens. You know what I mean? There are situations, I think, where the sponsee will not listen to what the sponsor is saying or doing, and then it's kind of like, I think the more apt conversation would be, and I've, witnessed this with people before, which is like, okay, so what are we doing? I mean, I actually had a sponsor that said that to me, I don't know, 10 years ago and whatever, and it was longer than that, I don't know, but it was like right when I came back into going to meetings, and he was like, I'm asking you to work at 4th step, which is, searching fearless moral inventory. You've been really resistant to doing this. I don't know why you don't want to do it. But he's like, what are we doing? Like, you call me up every once in a while, and we just talk on the phone. And he was like, you're not really using me as a sponsor. And I was really like not happy about it. And I remember I called my friend Tanya and I said, I'm like, this really kind of hurt my feelings. And she said, be thankful that somebody is holding you accountable like that. And I was like, it completely changed my perspective of it, And I looked at it and I was like, thank God somebody is willing to say something because they want me to improve, So I think it's tough. I think it's difficult. I think the thing you have to remember is, to the person out there with the sponsor is, and this is the other thing is, that everybody out there, if you have a sponsor, that sponsor should have a sponsor. So they're experiencing the same thing that you are, right? But anybody out there, you got to remember, you got to do what's right for your sobriety. You have to advocate for your own sobriety. And if you're not getting what you need, go to your sponsor and say, I'm not getting what I need. Or if it doesn't feel the way that you want it to feel, go find somebody else, you know? If it hurts your sponsor's feelings, that's on them. That's their crap, you know? They'll have to get over it eventually anyway, you know? And hopefully you'll get what you want. So that's kind of how that goes. But I think it's a great question. The next comment was, Peter, I have never worked a 12-step program, and I've been sober 7 years in April. I've never learned much about them. The meetings I have been to were mostly people court-ordered who didn't want to be there. You inspire me to want to work the program to get emotional sobriety because I know I'm not. Any advice? Well, what was interesting about this comment, actually, I think these comments were from like a different video that I did, maybe about sponsorship, I don't know. But I saw this video, or I saw this comment, right? And then last week, Tanya, we were going to the meeting, and she said, we're going to go to a different meeting tonight. And I said, okay, well, what meeting are we going to? And she said, this meeting, blah, 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 whatever. And I had never been to that meeting before, and neither had Tanya. And the reason that we weren't going to our home group, it was because sometimes they use the space that we have for our home group to like host different things. And so we go to a different place, and the place is like real small. And Tanya was like, I don't want to be in that small room tonight, whatever. So we were trying a different meeting, and it was great trying a different meeting. And so, but what was interesting, and I had just read this comment, okay, was that literally like the entire room was on paper, okay? Now, what on paper means is that people come to meetings, and they're either in treatment programs or they're court-ordered to go to meetings, and so they're getting the sheet signed, okay? Which means they're coming to meetings because they have to have this sheet signed, this court sheet or this treatment sheet. It doesn't mean necessarily that they don't want to be there, they're not getting anything from there. And I have to say, okay, like, you know the whole idea of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, which I believe is true. But I have seen a lot of people, and when I say a lot, I would say 30 or 40%, which I actually think is a lot. And I'm pulling that number out of thin air, okay? But I don't know. Like, I mean, I've seen quite a few people who have been, you know, court-ordered, who have been in drug court, who have been in work release, who have been in treatment programs and been ordered to go to, program or meetings that have stayed sober, you know? I'm a believer in drug court. I really am. When you're court-ordered to go to a meeting every day for 6 months and, you know, you have to stand in front of a court and your sponsor has to come and you have to, like, under the eyes of law, work a program, like, it's kind of hard to fake that to some degree. I'm not saying that people can't. I have, you know, I used to sign my own forms back in the day when I was on probation. I'm just saying that you can do it, right? But we go to this meeting, and like everybody in the room, with the exception of Tanya and I think like one other person, were there. Like it was all papers that this guy was like, the chairperson was signing, right? And it was interesting because I was thinking about this comment as we brought up the topic, and the topic was talked, and we were talking about it and going around the room. And the conversation was so refreshing because it was from a completely different perspective, right? You know, I'm used to hearing people speak that have 20, 30, 40 years of sobriety, but here I was hearing people that had 2 weeks, 30 days, 40 days sober, some of them a week sober, share on their perspectives of sobriety. And it was, I don't know, it was so refreshing to hear a different point of view. And so I think what I would recommend to somebody, especially somebody seeking emotional sobriety, is, first of all, I just want to say this, that there are specific books that you can find about emotional sobriety through 12-step programs. So if you want to put in 12-step programs and emotional sobriety, it will pull up those books and you can read those books. The other thing is, I would go to, I don't know, some of those meetings, or reach out to somebody in a Zoom meeting, or somebody in town, or I don't know, call up the local, chapter of your 12-step program or whatever, and ask them, what are some meetings in this town that I can go to that are going to have more long-term sobriety? Because I'm seeking long-term sobriety right now, and they'll tell you where there are more meetings that are long-term sobriety. The meeting that my sponsor goes to, that her home group, I think like the average age of sobriety over there is like 25 years. I mean, like it's like 25 to like 45. I mean, there's a lot of long-term sobriety. A lot of the meetings that I go to, you know, there's a lot of newcomers and there's a lot of people that have like, I would say 1 to 5 years in there, which I think is a good mix, you know. But I understand when you're talking about emotional sobriety. Hell, at 5 years, I didn't even know what emotional sobriety was. I don't even know that I really truly knew what it was until like 2 or 3 years ago, you know. Emotional sobriety is, who am I when I put down the drink and the drug? Who am I deep inside? What are those issues that I'm working on? And those are the things often that we have to work on outside of there in therapy and things like that, you know? I think to have a good mix, that would be what I would recommend, you know, for myself as well, to have a good mix of perspective. So maybe go to meetings where there are people that are there for whatever reasons, even if they're there because, you know, they got court ordered to go there, doesn't mean that they don't realize they have a problem. That might be the 4th time that they've been court ordered to go to meetings, you know. Did I see the person, you know, that doesn't want to be in the meeting as well? Sure, there's always that person, you know. I've seen that person for 28 years that doesn't want to be in a meeting, you know. I was that person many times, you know, and that's okay, right? But, you know, I think for me, I have to be open to the experience and open to listening to other people's perspectives, and then also go to meetings where I'm going to hear a different perspective from somebody that has 40 years. And then when I'm going to a meeting where there is somebody that has 40 years, and I'm going to a meeting where somebody is court ordered, and I'm kind of like listening to all of it, you know, and saying, okay. But then I also think it's important for me, and I can only share, like I said, my experience, strength, and hope. Emotional sobriety for me comes from having a sponsor. It comes from working the steps. It comes from doing inventory, sitting down with another person who, in my case, was my sponsor, going through that inventory, looking at the patterns in my life and saying, these are the things I need to change. These are the people that I need to make amends to, working on those issues, flushing all of that out, cleaning up the wreckage of my past, working on my character defects, making amends to people, and then being of service to others, you know? And those issues that she and I couldn't work out together are the things that I bring to therapy. And so that's kind of how it works for me. And that's how and I wouldn't say that I have perfect emotional sobriety in any means whatsoever. I mean, it's constantly working on these things, you know, but I think over time, it's something that you can slowly start achieving and feeling better about if you're working on those things, you know? So anyway, I wish you the best. And I would, you know, try some, you know, different meetings and maybe see if you hear what you need to hear at different places. And maybe ask some people that you know that are sober and say, have you gone to any other meetings where you hear something different? You know, those kinds of things. So anyway, let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.